Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, Darkside Phil here. Welcome to Ask the King, episode 76. This is the 76th episode of the show. Holy crap. I know, I've done a lot of these, haven't I? Today is May 31st, 2019. So, we're at the very end of May. There's a lot to talk about on Ask the King. We got a lot of good questions this time around. Good variety of questions, both from forum posters as well as people on Twitter. If we have opportunity later in the show, we will also take some questions from stream chat. This is kind of a hype season. We're in the midst of some good new game releases. We're right before E3. There's a lot of attention and hype on games and stuff right now, which is a good thing. And I'm excited for another Q&A show. Now, last time I did Ask the King 2 months ago, we were uncertain about the future of the show. We were wondering, does the show even have a place? Because it was like pulling teeth to get questions for the show. I'm not going to lie. It took a while to get questions for this episode too, but I think some of these questions are quite good. We'll see how the show goes today. And again, we'll keep playing it by ear. And if you guys feel that this is a show that should continue every other month, like I've always done it, then I'll keep doing it. But if at any point you guys feel the show has gotten stale and it's something that maybe I should stop doing, then we'll stop doing it. So let's see how it goes. Fair enough? All right, I got a couple quick shout-outs to start before we begin with the show. Goma Naru Merchant did a 90-bit cheer and says, I noticed you had Final Fantasy IX on your dashboard the other day. Any chance you'll ever stream it? I've already explained I'm playing it this summer. When I finish with Phoenix Wright Trials and Tribulations, I'm playing that as the RPG of the summer. That's why I have it on there. But I need to finish Phoenix Wright first, which is why I've now increased the frequency I'm playing Phoenix Wright to 2 times a week. And Straight Cash Homie gave me a $5 tip. Thank you very much. He says, Ask the King is back. I'm so hyped. Thank you, Straight Cash Homie. I appreciate that very much. Let's go ahead and get this up to $16 in tips for the show as we begin. All right, guys. So, just a reminder, okay? Multiple ways you could submit questions for Ask the King. The first, you could do it right now. Head over to my forums on thekingofhate.com. There's already a thread there for the next episode, which is tentatively scheduled for July 25th, 2019. We'll see if it actually ends up being that or if it gets bumped. Sometimes it changes. But you could already post up your questions on my forums. In addition, if you become a patron of mine, on my Patreon, there is a perk level where you get your question answered guaranteed on the show. And the first questions that we're answering today are from a longtime supporter and patron. All right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's do that. Let's answer the question from the patron who wanted to get his question answered. So his name is Planet Jeff. You may recognize him. He's a longtime supporter and fan of mine. And he asked a few things. Let's go ahead and go through them. He says, hey, Phil, just wanted to hope that you would catch this question in time for tomorrow. He actually posted it up last night. I've loved following you over the years and have always enjoyed your content, your weird and quirky, humorous bend on games, calling out the craptastic, and praising the unsung worthy offerings. I know your choices are often limited, but they're way more than mine. It's also very cool that extreme financial distress notwithstanding, you found a job you truly love. It's so sad that many people can't say that because, flipping burgers, anyone, but it's awesome for you that you have. Now, again, taking money out of the picture because you wouldn't have to work for more than money, can you think of any other job that you could have done for this long and also called it a job you would love doing, even if making money at it was just as hard? I joke that being an official game reviewer might be one, but I've heard you rant about that business model many a time. Over the years, there's different various things that I've wanted to do. When I was younger, I always dreamed that I wanted to be a firefighter or a police officer, and then I wanted to go to the army. And then as I grew up, I realized those things were incredibly dangerous and probably not things that I wanted to do. Then as I got older, I thought that maybe I would want to be a computer programmer and make computer programs and maybe eventually video games. And that fell through when the whole tech bubble burst in the early 2000s when I was actually going to school, university, for my degree. There was no jobs in that sector anymore. So that fell through. So then I went to school for business, and that really didn't amount to anything. Like, literally, everything I tried to do just didn't pan out. Then later in life, when I actually started making money at stuff, I was like, man, some other things, maybe one day I would like to open my own business that's not an internet-based business, maybe a brick-and-mortar store of some sort. But you think, what kind of a store would succeed that's not a franchise, right? So I thought maybe open up my own restaurant, an Italian restaurant or something like that. Of course, everyone knows restaurants are incredibly risky, right? I would say the only other thing outside of what I do now, because I love what I do for a living, no lie. The bottom line is I would love to do something creative, maybe be a writer, director, I don't know. Like, I always thought about, man, I would like to do a cool, epic kind of a series, a television show that's kind of like an anime. Like a television show that has this really awesome branching, arcing plot line with multiple characters that's kind of like an anime series. I always thought about that. and I always had a couple ideas in my head, and of course I'm not going to talk about those ideas just in case, but you know, there's a few ideas I had in my head for a cool story you can Americanize the plot of an anime and almost turn it into a cool TV show or something. But I have no money. I have no directorial skills. This is never going to come to fruition. This is just a couple ideas of things that I had over the years that I thought might be fun to do. You know, Project 7 essentially was kind of like, with my limited resources and limited knowledge and limited talent, what I could probably do with that kind of a thing. And then that thing just fell apart, as you guys know. So at this point, you know, what I do is what I do. I don't really ever foresee myself ever being able to do any of those other things that I kind of thought I might want to do in my life. That's just reality. So, all right. So now we move on to the forum questions. We start off with a question from Tynel, and he asks, "What's your thoughts on fighting games over the years? Have they improved or not?" Well, as someone who grew up in the 1990s playing Street Fighter II as the very first competitive fighting game ever in arcades, and then went on to become a competitive player in the late 90s and early 2000s, and then you could even say a top-level pro player for a couple years there in the mid-2000s. I can tell you that fighting games have definitely changed. And in some ways, I do feel they're for the better, and in other ways, I feel that it's for far worse. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. Fighting games over time have evolved in many positive ways. Now, when a fighting game comes out, you get a wide roster of characters. You know, back in the day, a game would come out and it would have like 8 characters. Street Fighter 2 had 8 fighters. You know, future iterations had fighters that were kind of like, you know, 12 fighters in the game. Now, fighting game comes out, typically you get a really good array of characters in it. And unlike some of the fighters from back in the day, like Street Fighter Alpha 3 or Marvel vs. Capcom 2, half the cast and those over-bloated rosters wasn't even viable for competitive play. They were in the game, but they weren't great characters, and they were very hard to play with at a competitive level. The game was very unbalanced. Typically today, when a fighter comes out, at least almost every fighter has a chance for doing something interesting in the game, you know. There are some exceptions to that rule, but in general, I think that fighting games have more varied and balanced casts. Also, just the variety of characters in games now. You know, back in the day, you would have like 3 archetypes: the grappler, the projectile zoner, and the hybrid. And that was it. Now in fighting games, there's like characters that have projectiles plus grapples plus this, like a jack of all trades. You got characters that are just oddball characters. You can't even really describe what the hell they're supposed to be. I think that's good because variety makes things better rather than just being the same plain old formulas followed over and over, okay? Undoubtedly, I think we can admit that graphics, holy shit, have improved over the years. You know, old school fighting games were just 2D plain, hand-drawn, pixelated artwork, while now you get full-on 3D, everything, giant explosion graphics or whatever. A lot of people just watch these games because they're flashy eye candy and never even understand what they're like to play at a competitive level. I mean, the whole Marvel vs. Capcom series, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and all that, that was why that series was popular. Not because it was competitively good, but because it was so amazing to watch. It was fun to watch, right? But, you know what I would say is over time, from being an old school player, I really feel that fighting games have kind of become more washed out and more watered down. And what I mean by that is, back in the day, if you wanted to be good at fighting games at a competitive level, you had to really work your ass off. You had to go to the arcades. You had to go to tournaments constantly. You had to play people in person because that was really the only way that you could be exposed to high-level competition. You had to play these people in person. There was no YouTube to share videos. There was no live streaming so you could see shit on launch day, the abusive shit in the game. It took a lot of time and a lot of dedication. And in addition, back then, oh my God, the input windows to play these games, there was no input shortcuts. There was no, you know what I mean? Like all the things that make a game easy to play right now. You could never, ever back in the day, play a fighting game on a pad like this. Forget it. You would try. You'd buy the home version of the game. And you're like, fuck, I can't do half the stuff I could do, you know, on an arcade cabinet on this controller because the game is so control intensive. Good luck getting those tick throw combos, those perfect reversal shoryukens and all that. It was very hard to pull those moves off. In the modern era, everything has a shortcut and everything has an easy mode way to do it. And they did that because they wanted to appeal to the modern masses and make fighting games more mainstream. They realized, man, modern fighting games are great at a competitive level, but it really just appeals to a small kind of a niche audience. If we made this game more accessible to the masses, then the game would be better and we would sell more. But in reality, what happened is the games became more and more watered down. Instead of having a high skill level to play at a competitive level, now the games have a mid to low skill level to play at a competitive level. Games like Street Fighter V, where the entire game is based on pattern play because they added so much input lag to when you press the button and when your move actually comes out in the game, the entire game becomes a pattern rather than reactionary gameplay. Oh, someone made a mistake, time to react with the reversal move that I can blow through and now I can take control of the match. Instead of that, it's more like do a pattern, guess, do a pattern, 50-50 mix-up, do a pattern. And that's really essentially not what fighting games were to start with when they were competitive back in the day. They were about reactionary gameplay, mix-ups, and footsies. And now 2 of those 3 things aren't really in modern fighting games, and that can be really frustrating. To some extent, that's not true. Like, if you take a look at a game like Mortal Kombat 11, that game actually now took a step back from more pattern play and actually tried to become more of a hardcore reactionary fighter with things like reversal wake-ups, and more timing of anti-airs and corner combos being totally toned down how they used to be in the franchise. So maybe there is a step in the right direction, at least with certain fighting game franchises. But then you look at a game like Dragon Ball FighterZ, the entire game is rushed down in mix-ups. And like, I'm not saying the game's not good. I'm just saying that game is not a game that's like in the tradition of what you would look for of an old school fighter. So things change over time. And if you're someone who played fighting games in the last 5 to 10 years only, and you didn't play old school fighters, and you didn't play the core of Street Fighter 4 when it was at launch and all of that, and you are not aware of how things have changed over the years, and you only played the more easier fighters to play, you might not see any changes or any issue in any of this. And that's okay. You know, that's not your fault, and certainly no one's saying, oh, you don't have skill. I mean, fighting games still take a lot of grind, a lot of dedication, and a lot of commitment in order to get good at competitively, but it's just different than it used to be back in the day. Instead of it being, you know, execution skill and hardcore practice, it's more like, it's just harder to explain, like having to know, I need to execute my pattern perfectly and guess. It's almost like gambling in a lot of ways. You know, when you go to the casino and you play poker, right, and you're trying to read someone's poker face, gee, I wonder if they're going to block low, block high, or try to blow through with a reversal, and you have to guess correctly. It's kind of like, gee, I wonder if this guy's bluffing with his hand, or if he has a tell to read what he's actually going to do in this situation. It's almost like playing poker and gambling rather than it actually being a competitive thing that you're reacting to what's going on in the game. And that's a different thing. It's still competitive. I mean, look at gambling. Poker is incredibly competitive, right? But it's different. And for someone like me who's been around the block and played the old school stuff, I like the old school stuff better. I really do. I would much rather play Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo over any modern fighting game. And that's just the God's honest truth. I would still play that game to this day because, yeah, is there some guessing and gambling involved in the game? Yes. But more often than not, it's more about timing, strategy, footsies, setups, and reactionary gameplay than any of that other stuff. And if you're really good at having great hand-eye coordination, good execution, good reactions, and you know what I mean, you're going to excel at a game like that. Even if someone else found this cheesy pattern that seems to work, you can usually overcome it. In these modern games, you can't, because everything's so dumbed down and there's no reactionary gameplay anymore. It's just, how do you beat the cheesy pattern? Find another cheesy pattern that beats it, or guess correctly to blow out of it somehow. And to me, that's rock, paper, scissors gameplay. That's gambling style gameplay. That's not like true skill. That's just me, though, and that's my opinion. And you can completely, again, if you're someone who hasn't played the old school fighters, you don't even understand that. So to you, you've only played the modern fighters, and you think, well, that's all there is, right? So I understand that. I totally get that. But for me, growing up, I think they're, like I said, better variety of characters and build of characters at launch. And the fact that the graphics are much better. I'll also say this, the fact that games can get patched over time, because I'll be honest with you, like back in the day, an arcade game would come out, that was it. It was very rare if there was like an update patch or a new version of an arcade game. It was very rare. I would tell you, one of the rare exceptions, Mortal Kombat 4, when it was released in arcades, was actually so broken at launch, they had to patch it to even be a functional game. At launch, the game had infinite throws, where you would do a throw to someone. The throws in that game were like holds. So you would show twisting someone's leg, and then you could just run up and twist their leg again. They couldn't do shit. There was no way to break out of it. It was a broken glitch. So that game was so bad, they actually had to re-release the game, a Wave 2, for free to arcade owners. And it cost Midway, at that time, that was the company that owned them, Midway, a ridiculous amount of money to fix the problems that they created with the first broken version of the game. But in general, most arcade games didn't get patched, didn't get updated. What you had on that game board or later on that disc, that was the game. So, case in point, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, that game was rife with bugs and glitches, but they became part of the integral competitive gameplay of the game because there was no opportunity to ever fix any of them. Versus today, where you're playing on launch versus what you play 2 weeks from launch versus what you play a month, 6 months down the line, could vary drastically as they patch and rebalance the games. That's a double-edged sword. In some cases, that could be a great thing, especially if they really screwed the game up and there's something that's so broken or overpowering at launch. You don't want to be stuck with that for 2 years until they have an official new version of the game, right? So it's good that they can balance patch that stuff out. At the same time, from a competitive standpoint, what if you work your ass off, you learn that version of the game, and now, oh, this is the character that I'm the best with. Oh, they patched that character, now that character sucks ass because they felt that it was too abusive. Well, how is that the competitive player's fault? It's not. And you just wasted 3 months of your life playing that character. Now that character's terrible. You got to completely relearn the game from the ground up. Is that fair? So I see a lot of issues with the way modern games are handled, just as much as I can understand that the way that they're handled could be seen as a positive thing. So for me, it's an ultimate mixed bag. In some ways, fighting games have gotten better over the years, and in a lot of ways, they've gotten worse. It is what it is, okay? Bagel Goose asked for the history of this cowboy hat. Everyone knows the history. I got it in Tennessee when I went down there in the very early 2010s. I think it was like 2009 or 2010 to be in a tournament to qualify to go to Japan for Super Battle Opera. It was Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo was the game. Since I was doing tourism, I just bought the hat on a whim at a cowboy hat store in Tennessee, and they mailed it here. They mailed it to my home at the time, and I decided to start wearing it for Ask the King, and the rest is history. All right, the next question. From Sergio29, he says, any chance to be streaming Game Boy or Game Boy Color games like the Zelda Oracle of Ages or Seasons, Wario Land, Super Mario in the future? It's not out of the question, but I would have to do it through official means. If you guys aren't aware, a few years ago, Nintendo really cracked down on ROMs on the internet and made it almost impossible to get a ROM of any Nintendo game and play it on, say, an emulator. So what used to be incredibly viable really isn't so viable anymore. You have to rely on official Nintendo channels and official Nintendo releases in order to play these games. So perfect example here, if they actually released a digital version of these games for, say, the Wii U Virtual Console or for the Switch or whatever, yeah, I would definitely consider playing said games, absolutely. But if they don't do an official version, there's really no way to do it. In addition, retro games, I have a blast playing them, but doesn't really bring in a mainstream audience. This would have to be something that I would balance with other stuff that would bring in people for a good mix of content on my streams. In particular, the games you mentioned, if you're not aware, the Zelda games apparently are going to get remastered. I think it's Zelda, the 2 Zelda games that I think that took place on islands or whatever. And I don't know if that's Oracle of Ages and Seasons. I don't remember because I never played them. Apparently, they're getting modern remasters. And yeah, I would definitely consider playing those games. So the answer is, if available on modern consoles digitally, and if there's a reason to play, I could time it and balance it with other content or whatever, the answer is yes, I would consider playing them. Okay? All right, up next from No Chill Ben. All right, No Chill Ben. He asks, you've stated in the past that you attended business school for 4 years at one point in your life. Are there any memorable classes, times, or experiences from your time in business school? Anything you learned during your time that you still use to this day, such as accounting or finance? As I write this, I'm 5 weeks away from graduating college with a bachelor's degree in business administration. I'm interested in how your time at business school went, how it impacted your life. Well, I would say, first of all, I've talked about these over the years, but let me summarize in one place since you're asking the question. Okay. One of the most impactful classes I ever had in my life was actually a religion. It was a religion course. It was about all kinds of different religions. Okay. And I actually went to Fairfield University, but it was actually considered a private Catholic university, okay? And so when I went to this university, there had actual classes about religion, which unheard of in other universities. They wouldn't touch that, right? So this religious class that I went to, they taught about all different religions, not only, Christianity, but regular, the core of it, which was based in Judaism, Buddhism, the Muslim religion, what was the other one? Basically, they touched upon like every major religion. And if anything, what I learned in that course was that every religion almost has exactly the same core moral beliefs about what's good and bad in life. There are some disagreements, but in general, they all kind of agree. They do. And it's funny because they all have these figureheads that are almost exactly the same people in their religions as well. Who, it's like, you know, in Christianity, you've got Jesus, right? And then oh my God, you got Muhammad, right? You've got Buddha. They're all almost like similar figures in each individual religion that are almost the same. And they almost stand for similar things. There's definitely some very big core differences. But if anything, when I took this course and we studied all these various religions, at once, we sat down and looked at it and said, you know what? They're all very similar, and why do we all hate each other for? Like, if you believe in Islam as the true religion, or you believe in Christianity or the core of Judaism, or if you believe in Buddhism, or you believe in Hinduism, if you believe in any of these, why do you have to think that the other one is wrong? Why can't we all just be accepting of what we want to believe and what core belief system we want to have as part of our lives? And why can't we be more open to that? And it's actually weird because here I am in a classroom studying various religions, and if this were, 1,000 years ago, during Inquisition times and shit, people would be killed for even thinking of studying other religions. That's how crazy our history is as humans, how crazy our mindsets have changed, how fucked up things have done over the years. If you even thought about talking about that other religion, we're going to cut your balls off and string you up in the middle of the town square. Like, Jesus Christ, because you think I'm a heretic just because I acknowledge that another fucking religion exists, But here I am at an actual Catholic university learning about other religions. That class opened my mind. It really did. Like, I'm not even lying. It opened my mind to the possibilities of being more accepting to other people and realizing that maybe what you had as your core belief or core religious system for your whole life may not actually be the one true thing, and that you have to be more open-minded and more accepting of other people's. And I am, like, now, I actually enjoy and really feel like I am enriching myself and my own mind by learning about other cultures and other religions and other things. I think that it's a very good thing that you should do. As you become a more mature adult, it's something that everyone should do. Immerse yourself in other cultures and other religions, and you can learn so much about just the history of mankind rather than just being in this all little closed foot. What I believe was right and everyone else was wrong, and I should only listen to this, and I only want to know about this. I hate that kind of believing. Okay. So that's the first thing in university that I really felt opened my mind. Now, if you're talking specifically about studying business, I would say a few things. I would say utilizing software for financial purposes. So, for example, I learned Microsoft Excel, and now I don't even use Excel. I use the freebie version of it. I couldn't even tell you what it's called. I think it's like Open Office or something. So I use the same shit that I learned in high school and then university to this day to figure out things like my finances and my taxes and stuff. And I didn't learn it. I don't know how I would keep track of it. Good luck keeping track of that shit with pen and paper. Like, it's essential for you to have those kind of skills. And I learned all that stuff back then. Oh my God, marketing. I had a marketing class. And boy, did it open my eyes up to marketing. Because before I ever took that marketing class, I was very gullible. I bought into marketing and believed marketing at face value. And once I took that marketing class and I learned how all these spins and pitches and how they misrepresent shit to try to get you to think that it's what it's not, and have you run out. I mean, just in the 11 years I've been a content creator for the internet, think about games like Destiny. This game isn't a game, it's an experience. It'll change the way you see games forever. What the fuck? Destiny? And then you played the game, you're like, what the fuck were they talking about? That was pure 101 marketing. But I didn't understand that stuff until I took a course about it, and then I was like, wow, now I totally see how this shit works. And that's how I kind of almost became more skeptical and cynical when it came to what people say about movies and television and a product they're selling you or a video game. You have to be more skeptical because that marketing can catch you and hook you and make you go buy something that normally you wouldn't. Okay? There's more stuff too that I would say, but in general, my university days, I would say every year, I'm not even kidding, I went to a university for 4 years. Probably 2 courses a year had anything in them that I ever used. In general, I hate to say this, the professional education system in the United States is mostly a scam. And what I mean by that is, very frankly, you don't use most of it. They make you go to these extraneous classes that have nothing to do with anything you're ever going to use to pay them more money. Oh, you need this many credits to graduate. Yeah, but out of all the credits, only 10% had to do with a job I'm ever going to do. Why the fuck did you make me do 90% of this stupid bullshit? Because you wanted more money. You wanted me to keep paying you to go to your fucking university and class after class after class, rack up this fucking student loan debt and shit that I paid you so that you could fucking rake me over the coals for this tons of money, $40,000, $50,000, you know, insane exorbitant tuition fees. For what? Just train me for a job I want to fucking do. And then the hilarious part about all this is, when you actually get to the job force, 95% you learn on the fly on the job. 95% of what you're ever going to do for your job, you learn there. You don't learn it in university. You learn very little prerequisite in university, and that's why when you're going to university, you got to try to get your foot in the door with a internship or a partnership or whatever it is. You have to try to get that valuable on-the-job experience before you seek a job. Because for me, what happened was I was working almost full-time during the time that I went to college to pay the bills. I was paying my student loans and paying bills and responsibilities. At the same time I was going to school, I had no time to do things like an internship or whatever. I would have loved to do it, but I couldn't do it. I had to work to pay bills. So because of that, I didn't have the opportunities a lot of other guys. There was 2 or 3 other kids that I knew from my classes that got into fucking investment firms and shit just because they knew people who got them in the door of these internships, and they were able to do it because their families were rich. Their families paid their free ride for college. They didn't have to work their butts off to pay back their student loans. And because of that, they didn't have to work during college. They did the internships instead, and then they got these giant, expensive, you know, high-paying jobs right out of college. I couldn't do that. So in reality, university is the first step towards getting towards that job that you want to do, but it's not the end-all be-all. You have to do all this other shit, and you basically have to be lucky or rich. It's that simple, and it sucks because that's how it is in America right now. You got this whole kind of a university system based on rob the kid of the next 20 years of livelihood with student loans so they can afford to go to a school where 95% of the stuff they learn has nothing to do with the job they do. Oh, by the way, just doing all that isn't even enough to get the job. You also have to do all this extraneous shit outside of it. Like, what the fuck is this? And then they wonder why so many jobs in the country have gone away, the valuable jobs, and now most people have to hold down 2, 3, 4 part-time fucking jobs to make a living. This is why. Because they set up this system for us to fail here in the United States. Alright, let's see here. Vinny Vitty, resub for 5 months to keep it up, Phil. Thank you, Vinny Vitty. Twitch missionary tipped me $1 talking about Christianity. I understand where you're coming from. I know I was raised a Christian, but I'm not going to quote that simply because that's a religious quote, and we don't do that here. Alright. DJ Bruno actually cheered and said that in the Bible, it actually tells you to check into other religions. Well, I don't know about that. I certainly can't remember any quotes about that. And what I can actually tell you is when I was growing up, I was discouraged from checking out other religions because I was told growing up in Catholic school, this is the one true religion. Those other people are misled. It'll be your job later on in life to go out and lead those people to the true way if you can. And I'm like, okay, I'm indoctrinated. Sounds good. And then later on, I'm like, what? I actually, was listening to this. All right. Let's continue on, guys. So, what time? We've done about a half an hour? We're at a half an hour? Okay, cool. Another 30 minutes before we have to take a break. Very nice. Okay, next question is from J. Bidg. I apologize, I probably didn't pronounce your name right. JBYDG. He asks, hey, Phil, I'm watching through your Mega Man playthroughs from 2011 again. Was wondering, do you still receive income from older videos like these? Well, here's the deal. Anything that you see on DSP Gaming, alright, that YouTube channel, was monetized from the start. Anything you see that was in DSP Gaming, I had a partnership on YouTube, and I was able to monetize those videos from day one, okay? And through the years, even though I'm no longer with a partnership with any partnership company, I'm just directly having my own ads run on those videos. If you see an advertisement on a video on my channel, I may or may not be making money on it. And I know that sounds confusing. Allow me to explain what I mean. In general, yes, everything I upload to DSP Gaming or any YouTube channel, I own the legal rights to. I own the copyright. Automatically, it generates a copyright by uploading to that channel, okay? So, yes, I should be able to have advertisement rights on all those videos, and if you watch an old video and there's an ad running on it, I should make money on it. The problem is, YouTube systems are completely broken, and I have been uploading so many videos. I think at this point I have around 60,000 videos, if not more, just on DSP Gaming alone, since 2011 when I opened the channel. Okay, fair enough. Actually, I take it back, 2010 when I opened the channel. Fair enough. But The problem is, over the years, YouTube's erroneous systems like Content ID have matched a ridiculous amount of my videos to other people's content who don't actually own any legal rights to them. So, I'm playing a video game that has an in-game soundtrack. Oh, well, the owners of that in-game soundtrack uploaded their soundtrack to iTunes and now don't want anyone making money on that music on YouTube, so they load their music onto YouTube's Content ID system. My gameplay video gets claimed automatically, and now that music maker, who has nothing whatsoever to do with the actual video, the gameplay itself, the video game itself, only the song in there, gets 100% ad revenue rights to my video. Now, I just want you to think about this for a moment. Does this sound legal at all? I mean, even if you were to go to a court of law, and if that music composer were to argue, well, that music that's used in that video is my property, the judge would probably say, okay, well, that's one component of the video, and you have legal right to maybe have a claim to a part of that video, not the whole fucking video. So just at face value, YouTube's Content ID claiming system doesn't work. It's actually completely fucking illegal. Just having one piece of a video claimed completely for ad revenue is wrong. And it would never ever hold up in a court of law at all if anyone actually sued to try to get this system taken down. It would get shot down and destroyed. Okay? But no one wants to poke YouTube and get in trouble, because the bottom line is people make a living on YouTube. If you're making money on YouTube, right, you make a living doing this, you need to be able to continue doing so, or else where else is there to go? You can't go to another video sharing website and make a living. They don't exist. So you have to abide by YouTube's bullshit. So for me, I've been uploading 60, 70,000 videos to DSP Gaming since 2010. And yeah, I'd probably say, I'm not even kidding, probably about a third of those videos over the years have now been claimed or Content ID matched or whatever by a third party. And even though you may see ads on them, I may not even get paid anymore for those videos. Okay? So the truth of the matter is, if YouTube never instituted these broken systems, every video I've ever put out and I monetized, I'd still be making some money on right now. But I couldn't even tell you. You're watching Mega Man, what was the one you said? Mega Man 10 or whatever from 2011. I couldn't tell you if those gameplay videos, if I'm making money on them right now or not. I could be. I very well could be. And that's a good thing, obviously. Or someone else could be. For completely unrelated reasons, they could have claimed it over the years, and I had no legal recourse to stop it. And, you know, that's that. But in general, yeah, I do bring in some money from the old videos, okay? Is it a ton? Is it like an exorbitant amount? No. The bottom line is, even with an 11-year legacy, how many people on a daily basis really go back and watch my old videos? Maybe a few hundred, maybe 1,000 people a day want to go watch my old gameplay content. In general, people are watching the new stuff. You know, Phil's playing a new game, that's what brings in the views for today, not the old school stuff. And I'll always appreciate the fact that there's people who love my old stuff, and maybe people who discover me on a daily basis. Oh my God, this guy's been making videos since, 2009. I want to go back and see some of the old school shit he used to do. Look at all these freaking games he's played over the years. But essentially, there's no guarantee that I'm making money on any of that old stuff, even though I very well maybe, there's no guarantee. Okay? All right, let's continue. Mr. Jiminy P says, hey, Phil, as a guy who played countless games in the past decade, what are the games that truly impacted or changed your perception in gaming? That's actually a really interesting question, because as I've told you guys about my history as a gamer, I grew up in the 80s and 90s playing classic consoles like the Atari 7800, the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, PlayStation 2. And then, around that era of the early PS2, I became so infatuated with fighting games at a high level and playing them at a competitive level that I basically lost interest in console gaming. I only was going around playing competitive Street Fighter games pretty much for the most part. I ignored almost every other franchise, so I missed out on things like the Metal Gear Solid franchise, the Kingdom Hearts franchise, so many. I mean, I could sit here and name about 40, 50 franchises that were all huge in the early 2000s through like 2007, 2008. I missed out on like 8 years of pure gaming because I was just Street Fighter, okay? Then, when I came back to console games in 2007, 2008, the reason was because I had a bad back injury, a severely herniated disc in my lower back, it became unviable to play fighting games at a competitive level anymore because I couldn't travel. I was always the guy who drove to the tournament and carpool. Everyone carpooled with me. I drove. So it ended up being, Phil can't drive anymore. Well, I guess there's no way to go to tournaments. And it all became basically unviable. You know, I couldn't do it anymore at a competitive level. And in addition to that, I had spent so much time and money over the years on competitive Street Fighter. I'm talking thousands upon thousands of dollars. Flying all over the place, driving all over the place, hotel fees, food, venue fees. For what? You know, really when I looked at this in 2007, I was like, I've played fighting games for 8 years competitively. And yeah, I've done a lot. I've, won multiple EVO Easts, got top 4 at EVO one year. But what do I really have to show for it? You know, this was before the era when fighting games were big business and you could make a living doing it and there were giant prizes and sponsorships to be had. None of that existed back then. So for me, I was like, now I can't even go to the tournaments anymore because of my back. So I'm just going to kind of throw in the towel, a soft retirement, if you will. And I'm going to try to re-immerse myself back into console gaming. And when I actually started playing console games again, I was blown away by how different they were. You know, they were console games back in like the late 90s were still at that point, even though I had played groundbreaking games like Resident Evil 1 and stuff like that, they were still kind of basic and primitive. And then I remember some of the first games I played, Mass Effect 1, Grand Theft Auto 4, Tales of Vesperia, and Blue Dragon. That's right. Those were like the 4 big games that when I played them. Oh, and BioShock. I should also say that. BioShock 1. Okay? So 5 big games that I played. And when I played these games, I was like, this is so different. This is like nothing that I even imagined. The games were incredibly immersive, right? They were interactive worlds at a larger scale than I had ever imagined. The graphical level blew me away at how good these games would look. Keep in mind, I'd only been playing classic Street Fighter games for like 8 years. I hadn't seen the advancement in graphical capabilities that had been progressively getting better and better over all this time frame. Okay. So, that being said, when I immersed myself back into console games, I was completely blown away. And I in particular, I remember playing Grand Theft Auto 4 and being like, man, if this is what gaming, I missed out on so much. Like, I actually felt like, Jesus, like, I had put myself into this bubble, this very tunnel vision like bubble where all I saw was fighting games, right? And because of that, I had missed out on so much. And I started re-immersing myself in console games, and it blew me. So I would say those are probably the 5 games that really, opened my eyes to this is what games could actually do and be. That blew me away. Now, of course, you could argue, well, Phil, then you started doing it for a living, doing YouTube videos, and I could always, oh my God, games like Dead Space, right? And further games and franchises like Mass Effect 2 and the BioShock franchise, BioShock Infinite, obviously the Uncharted series, games like Heavy Rain that had crazy, choose your own adventure interactive experiences, stuff like that. There's been so many games. I could just sit here endlessly telling you games that I thought were really fun experiences that kind of like, wow, this is great and something different and changing the way that we game, and this is really cool. So, I would say that's some of the big ones, at least, in the last 10, 15 years. Okay? All right. How much time we got? We got about 20 minutes left. Okay, good. All right, the next question is from... Hold on a second. Oh, my laptop froze. Okay, there we go. The next question is from Guitar Player 1939, and he asked the following. Do you really think that Death Stranding will be released in November, or do you think that it will be delayed until next year? I hope it gets released in November. Hoping versus reality are two completely separate things. I do hope it gets released in November. I hope that for the first time, because Hideo Kojima was able to have full control over what he did with this game, unlike when he was with Konami and there was always deadlines and rushing and cutting corners and bullshit. I'm hoping that now he's had time to really complete his game to fruition. It is the culmination of exactly what he wanted this game to be, and that he's ready on November 8th to unleash his masterpiece, his magnum opus to the world. I hope that's what it ends up being, because this guy deserves it. This guy worked his ass off for a company that mistreated him and his game team for many years. He needs to be able to have that creative control and put out a game there that he always wanted to make. I hope that's what this game is, and I hope this game blows us all away, being quite frank with everyone. I really do, because he deserves it as a game designer. We deserve it as fans. You know, like, we all need this. So if this game comes out on November 8th and it feels unfinished, that's going to be incredibly disappointing. The flip side of this is, if it gets delayed again, I hope it's because, oh man, well, it's not because his creative vision was stifled, but because maybe there was a technical aspect that went wrong at the end. They were trying to make a piece of the game engine work properly, and it wasn't working right, or there was some technical bugs at the end, and they just want to take a little bit more time to flesh out said bugs to make the game more polished, versus, man, there's a whole thing that I want to add now at the end and change the whole game. You know what I mean? So I guess we're going to find out come November, but I hope it doesn't get delayed again. As a gamer who's waited for this game to come out many years, I am hoping this game really does come out November 8th. I'm excited for it. At the same time, if it gets delayed for good reasons, I'm okay with that. So I guess we'll find out, okay? All right, ladies and gentlemen, the next question, to forewarn everyone, it's incredibly lengthy, but I think it's a great question, and I actually think this is a question that may even just finish up this part, and we'll take a break after I answer this question, because it's a really good question, and I think it's going to basically spur a lot of discussion and a lot of reactions, okay? So here we go. Get ready, guys. So this one is from Superblindman. You may recognize the name. He's been a long-time viewer and follower of mine. Recently, he's become a streamer himself who's become successful, and he actually is a blind gamer. He cannot see, but he finds ways to play video games and stream them live and make them entertaining for a viewing audience, which is very much a reason to give props and respect the guy, right? All right, now let's go ahead and let us read his question, because it's very lengthy, so bear with me, okay? All right. Greetings. You'll have to bear with me as this one requires a lot of context. My apologies. Nevertheless, here we go. You have expressed in the past, he's talking to me, that you don't like to change any controller-related settings in games because you prefer to play the game on the way that the developers had intended. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one example of this, though if memory serves, it's not the only one. I'll explain. As accessibility becomes more mainstream, more options in games have started to appear. Not just subtitle options or colorblind options, but all sorts of options, up to and including the ability to drastically change the way the controls work in some games. As this happens, as the amount of options available for gamers increases, and as the way in which you can play games becomes more fluid, one thing becomes clear to me. Game developers intend for you to have a good time playing their game. Whether that means that you adjust a few things to make it a better experience for you personally doesn't matter, so long as you can get enjoyment out of it. The options are there because the developers intend for them to be there. My outside-the-box attempts at games alone should be enough to demonstrate that there really is no right or wrong way to play. I ask you to consider this, considering how gaming has changed and that options like this really didn't exist in the past, and speak your thoughts on developer intent. Or if you want it in the form of a question, what do you think of my line of thinking on the matter? Have I at least provided perspective? Thank you and continue to be awesome. Great question, and it's going to definitely have a lot of discussion around it, okay? Before I get to the answer, holy crap, thank you very much to Frieza Soldier 156, who just tipped me $100 live here on the stream. He said, hope you had a great day off yesterday. Hope this helps with your financial situation. Thank you, Frieza Soldier. It absolutely will. Don't get me right. It absolutely 100% will. So let's get him his props by putting him up there. Sadly, this now has scrolled everything off the screen here. So I think what we're going to have to do, for now, guys, we're going to get rid of current subs. Simply because the monthly goal we already hit. Alright? The event we're doing tomorrow. So I'm just going to get rid of that for now. To make room for the live contributions. Fair enough. So let's go ahead and say yes. $117 on this stream. Thank you very much, Frieza Soldier. Of course, thank you to everyone who's contributed so far. But thank you to Frieza Soldier for that very generous contribution. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and answer the question. So first of all, what Superblindman is getting at is being a gamer who can't see. He's relying on developers to add in new ways to play their games. And personally, I can't attest to any of them because I, don't know what kinds of things that he relies on when he actually plays games for them to adjust so that he can actually play. I know, for example, he uses screen reader technology sometimes to see options on the screen. If he's in a menu, he needs a screen reader to be telling him what each menu option says so he can understand it, okay? And I'm sure if you have a game that's not compatible with that, it's completely inaccessible for someone like him, and that's a big downer, right? And so I could totally understand if he goes into a game and says, all right, first hour of this game, I basically just got to mess around with it with all the things and tools that I use to play a game and figure out, can I make it more accessible? Can I make the controls easier for me? Can I make it so that it makes sense and it's accessible to me? Totally 100% on board with that. I'm for making games more accessible to wider audiences, and I don't think that anyone with a handicap should be unable to enjoy the things that people who don't have said handicaps enjoy, right? What's the difference between someone who can't see or can't hear versus someone who can't, besides that they have that one thing? They should still be able to enjoy a game at face value, all right? And, you have to give massive props to game developers who go out of their way to add in these accessibility options, because in a lot of times I can imagine that takes a lot of time, effort, and extra investment money to make that happen. And the more that we see it with AAA game developers doing it, that's to be applauded and it's to be respected. Instead of these game developers that just rush out cookie cutter fucking games to make a quick buck, we should be looking at the guys who take their time to actually make their games not only a robust value for just the common gamer, but an accessible game to other people who don't have the same advantages that we might have. All right? Now, that being said, all right, what Superblindman is saying here is he hears me say things like, oh, well, I'm going to play this game with the default control setting because that was the intended thing the game developers has had. And he kind of disagrees and says, no, you should just be able to adjust the game to play it and have fun with it no matter what. So if that means you have to make the game easier to control, change the buttons around, change the difficulty settings, change this, change that, that's perfectly okay. All right. I agree and disagree, and I'm going to explain why. But first of all, I want to say shout out to T-Dre Eats, who just subscribed to the channel. Thank you very much for the subscription. Okay? I agree and I disagree, and here's why. I agree, if you're a common gamer and you're a person who's paying that full price or whatever the price is of the game, you should have the ability to adjust that game to your liking. You're absolutely right, Superblindman. That's why those settings exist. They wouldn't exist in the game if the game developer didn't intend that someone was going to adjust them to make the game more enjoyable for them. So if you, for example, are playing a game from Software and you feel that game is insanely difficult and there's a way to adjust the controls to make it more accessible or a way to adjust the difficulty level to make it more accessible, you should be able to do that. You bought the game, right? And if you want to adjust the difficulty level of a game or control level on the fly, you're in the middle of a game, and man, this is too difficult. Can I somehow adjust it on the fly to make it easier so I can get past this tough part of the game, and then maybe later on you want to adjust it back to being hard again? I think that's a good idea. I'll be honest, I do. In general, video games are not competitive. In general, and I say that as a very generalized statement. Most people who are playing video games, they're doing it for relaxation or leisure purposes. They're sitting at home, they're picking up their controllers at night after they've finished their 9-to-5 jobs or whatever it is that they have to do during the day, go to school, and gaming is their entertainment release. Man, I get to play some video games tonight. And not everyone gets entertainment value out of the same things. Not everyone needs to play a gruelingly difficult game where it's like balls to the wall, shove a cactus up your ass kind of difficulty. Oh, I overcame that insane boss that took me 4 hours to beat. Wow, my e-penis just grew 25 sizes and now I feel great. This was a great night. Not everyone wants that, People get different entertainment for different reasons in games. Some people just like playing a repetitive game that's grinding. They find that relaxing. Some people like games with challenge. Some people like games with great graphics. Some people like games with great stories and don't care about the level of challenge of the gameplay or if the gameplay even is existent in the game. They just want to have a fun, interactive ride, right? There's so many different genres and different kinds of games out there now. You can find what's your forte, and it's okay for you to experience that game however you want to get fun out of it. I 100% agree with Superblindman on this point. No one should come to you and talk down to you and say that, well, when you played that game, you didn't actually experience the real game and it wasn't valid because you had modifiers in that game. That's silly. That really is silly. That's kind of an elitist mentality, a get good mentality. And in particular, I have to say, at least for me, I see that with the From Software franchises. Games like Sekiro, where a lot of people couldn't beat it because they couldn't parry, which was the one game mechanic you absolutely needed to exceed at the game. You couldn't parry properly. And if you never mastered the parry mechanic, it was an unbeatable game. And people were like, man, we would really like other ways to beat it. Like when you play other From Software games, you could have different builds and different styles. You could be a heavy armor knight that's all defensive. You could be a glass cannon where you die real quick, but you do insane damage with a weapon. And why isn't that kind of variability available in Sekiro? And basically From Software said, tough titties, if you don't like the game, oh well, we're not going to dumb it down for you. We really feel that if you learn our core gameplay experience of parrying, that the game ends up being a worthwhile experience that's worth, mastering. Right? I understand that. I get that mentality. That's what I mean. Like, I can see both sides of this situation. All right? From my perspective, and this is just my perspective, you could completely disagree. If you're playing a game in your own home, you're not sharing this publicly. You're not like me. You're not someone who's broadcasting gameplay to the internet. You're not someone who is by any means saying that you're competitive at what you're doing. You're just at home having fun. You paid the same money as everyone else to play that game. You should have no problems being able to have modifiers and adjustments. Oh, different control scheme, easier difficulty, whatever it may be, as a way to overcome and complete that game, period. I think there's no problem with that whatsoever. I don't care that just because I played Sekiro and I eventually, by the end of the game, got pretty good at parrying, that I beat it that way. If someone else found a way, oh, there was modifiers in the game that you didn't have to use the parry and you did something different, I don't care. That's, to me, I found value in playing the game myself, and I don't need to now have this kind of mentality where you have to do it that way for it to be valid. And no one should feel that pressure, okay? Now, the difference between what I just described and what I do is drastic. I do portray myself as someone who's going to broadcast my gameplay publicly to the internet to put out an entertaining experience to my viewership. And everyone who watches me watches games for different reasons. Some people just watch to interact with me. Some people watch to see a new release being played by someone of a relatively low skill level in most places. Some people, in most cases, what I meant to say. Some people actually are watching to see if I can overcome a daunting thing. Some people just tune in to see me fail. All right, and I understand that. Whatever reason you may show up, I'm appreciative of that. But when I put myself on the internet as a public figure, I am now broadcasting myself to you and portraying, here's my product, okay? There's going to be some expectations of said product. And if every game I play, I say, well, I play every game on easy difficulty with modifiers that make it piss easy to win, and I don't care ever about challenge, that's going to isolate a certain group of viewers who are actually tuning in to watch me challenge myself at that game and have some challenge or difficulty to overcome. Playing something that's piss easy every possible moment isn't exactly the most entertaining thing unless people are there for other reasons, okay? And some people are. Like I said, some people are just here to interact with me. Some people are here to have a good chill time. Some people just want to see the story of the game and couldn't give two shits how hard it is to get through it, right? It's a different experience for everybody, all right? For me, the reason over the years that I've said things like, man, I should not change this control scheme because I want to, have that default game experience that the game developers wanted me to experience, is because I actually give my review style opinions on games. Now, I don't do formal game reviews anymore. That's very true. But during the gameplay of a game, I will give very honest and open commentary and criticism of said game. When I finish a game, in the credits, when they roll, I give you my overall view of the game and what I thought about it. If every game I play, I'm now tweaking and modifying it to make it easier for me, when I do those reactions and things, I couldn't tell you an honest opinion. Because what I've done is I've already took that default gaming experience that those game developers intended would be the default experience. When you buy a game and it's on default settings, by default, that's what the word default means. That's what it's supposed to be. Without modifying anything, that's what they want you to experience. Now, yes, you could tweak it for your own personal enjoyment, and I'm all for that. I am. But if I'm going to be honest about a game, I have to leave it at what they had intended me to experience, or else I'm modifying that default game experience for my own enjoyment, and that's not right. Because let's face it, not to say that this exists, because it doesn't, but what if, when Dark Souls 1 first released, You can play a default experience, and it's very challenging and cruelly crippling, and, very tough game to get through. But then I put it on easy mode. And on easy mode, you don't lose your souls when you die. And on easy mode, your weapons don't degrade. And on easy mode, this and this and this. You see what I mean? So I just turbo through the game. Wow, this is the best game ever. And I review the game 10 out of 10, perfect game, and I don't talk about any of those experiences that the default gamer would have. If anything, I think when people watch me play Dark Souls 1, they were like, holy shit, if anything, this shows that the gamer with no skill can't beat these games and is going to get frustrated. And if you actually tough it through and learn those games at a high level and master them, that's something to be applauded, because the average person isn't going to do it, right? And if I had just flown through the game like Superman, and if anything, a good example of this, when I played the game years later and I live streamed it for the first time, and I had people hold my hand the whole time, summon every boss, right? And they beat everything for me. That's essentially what it was. And essentially I could tell you guys, yeah, when I beat Dark Souls that first time, I didn't beat the game. I summoned to win, and that allowed it to be beaten. It wasn't a legitimate playthrough of the game where I felt like I had beaten every challenge legitimate. Of course not. And that's what I mean. Like, was that playthrough not fun to watch? No. But can you say that it was a legitimate playthrough that my opinion could be fairly represented because I faced every challenge myself? No, I couldn't. I couldn't accurately review that video game from a perspective of, say, a common gamer, because I had modifiers. I was summoning. Okay? So, to go back to the point, when I play a game, any new game that I boot up, I purposely don't mess with the controls. The only thing I'll do is actually up the brightness. Reason being, my capture setup, for whatever reason, it's always been like this, is actually darker on my capture than it is on my television. Like, a lot of times I can see stuff on my TV, but you guys are telling me, man, the game's too dark. So by default, I have to up the brightness or gamma settings so that you guys can actually viably see what's going on in the games. That's like the only variable factor that I would usually do in a game like that. Everything else I'll leave on default or normal, so that when I'm playing this game, I am getting the default or intended experience for the mainstream common person that the game developers have said, this is the experience you should be getting. Now, it's great that there's all these variables in there that you can adjust, especially if you have a handicap and you can't enjoy that default gameplay experience that the game maker made for you. That's not right. So it's great that they put in all these things that you can adjust to make it accessible, and I'm 100% for that. But if I made every game easy, how could I ever accurately tell you at the end of the game, oh man, this game was fair in this part and unfair in this part. This game was challenging in this part and not challenging in this part. All I would be telling you is, this is my opinion, asterisk, with all these variables. So I want to try to appeal to the common viewer, the common person who's just going to buy the game, sit down, and enjoy it at face value without a ton of variables. Admittedly, Superblindman, what I'm telling you right now is maybe my style of gameplay and game streaming and game playthroughs is not for someone who needs to play with a bunch of variables. If anything, right? By watching me play, you can find out, wow, if I didn't change a bunch of things, this is what the game would be like. Maybe now I know I need to adjust a bunch of stuff because of what Phil told me from that default experience. Seems like it makes it completely inaccessible to me. Maybe I need to adjust a few things to make it more viable. You see what I mean? But I understand what you're saying. You're basically saying, like, when I say, oh, I'm not going to touch anything because that's the default experience, it almost makes it feel like I'm writing off anyone else who plays the game with variables. I don't. In fact, if anything, I am the complete opposite mentality. I don't understand why this get good community even exists. Like, why do you give a shit how other people enjoy games? Why? Why do you care? If you're just a person who's sitting at home playing the game for yourself, you're not a competitor, right? Who gives a fuck how anyone else plays or enjoys a game? Now there are exceptions to the rule. For example, if I'm playing Street Fighter Online and I'm playing someone who has programmed every button to be a special move on their controller, they don't need to have any execution. They're playing this button and getting invincible shoryukens that blow through every time I press a button. That's unfair in a competitive environment. But that's a competitive environment. If you go to a tournament, they're never going to allow that. You see what I mean? When you're just playing these games at home, why do you care how someone else plays it? What variables they've got in there? Why is that even a factor in your fucking enjoyment or consideration? It shouldn't be. That whole get good mentality, it blows my mind that people care about it. Because for me, I've never been like that. I've never been one of those guys, wow, oh, did you know when I beat Sekiro, all right, I had gotten pretty good at the parrying system. Not amazing, not master level, but pretty good. I beat the final boss more quickly than probably 90% of the people who played the game, okay? Did I immediately go up and for the next month, every day, oh, by the way, I'm the guy who beat the final boss in 15 minutes, and here's a highlight montage of how I whooped his ass, and I hope it gets 100 million views on YouTube, and, you know, every once in a while I'll bring it up because it's hilarious that people will not acknowledge how well I did in a game for once, because it's actually a rarity that I would, but this was a rare occurrence where I did things well. Did I immediately make it my end-all, be-all of my existence? The next day I was on to another game. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't care, but that's how I am. But some people, they're just so infatuated. I beat the hard game. If you want to beat the hard game, you got to be challenged just like me. How dare you have variables in there to make it easier? That is so fucking stupid. Seriously, dude. Seriously. But anyway, I digress. Thank you for the question, Superblindman. Hopefully my answer helped to clear stuff up. Big Benj resubscribed for 8 months. Thank you, Big Benj. And your boy Bob did a 100-bit cheer and said, based. All right, guys. That is it for part 1 of Ask the King. What we're going to do now is take about 5 to 10 minute break. Then I'll be back with part 2, which is going to be finishing up the forum questions and actually moving on to Twitter questions. Looks like part 3 will probably be finishing up Twitter questions and maybe a few chat questions, okay? So thanks. Let's take a quick break. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll just be part 2, a separate video. If you're watching this on stream, I'm going to take a short break here, and then I'll be back. Okay, guys, thank you very much so far. Good show. I'll be back with more in just a moment.